Welcome, everyone. It is Arkeet Hodges here, president of the Black Achievement Fund, and I am very, very, very happy to be with you guys today for our Missing Pages of World History lecture series. This is class 2. And for those of you who are just tuning in, this lecture series is in honor of Dr. John Henry Clarke, who is one of our ancestors. He was a master teacher, historian, an activist, just a phenomenal human being. And it was his work that exposed me to what he called the missing pages of world history. And that is actually African history and human history. The origins of all humanity is in Africa. So when you think about that simple fact, you begin to wonder if the whole world, if all human beings originated in Africa, why do we spend so little time studying Africa? If Africa is the cradle of civilization, how is it that here in modern times, history jumps all the way from Africa to Western civilization? All of this is part of racism. It is the foundation, actually, of racism, and that is propaganda, the false propaganda that Western civilization started civilization, and that prior to Western civilization, the world was in darkness until the European came. That is how racism has been able to fester for so long. If you want to destroy anything, you must destroy the roots. You must destroy the foundation. If anybody out there can tell me that the roots of racism, that the foundation of racism is anything other than the false propaganda that African people are inferior to European people, correct me. But this is where we are. This is where we are. So, this lecture series is here to provide you guys with incontrovertible proof that the origins of humanity not only started in Africa, but all of the pioneering aspects to civilization were given to us by Black African people. And I say Black African people because in modern times, there are a lot of people who can claim African ancestry. But for a very, very long period, almost the totality of human history, Africa was Black, and it was Black African people who contributed to the floundering and the fostering of what we know as civilization. And the sad thing about it, everybody, is that the civilization that was created by these African people, and I'm not just talking about Kemet, and I'm not just talking about Nubia, because there were countless of other settlements of significant stature that came prior to ancient Kemet. So, we're going to talk about those tonight, and we're going to talk about a lot of the pioneering feats that Africans made before ancient Egypt. When I first started studying ancient Kemet, I was so blown away that my mind wandered to whether or not aliens did it myself. I was like, really? Human beings did this? And not just any human beings. The very human beings that the whole world thinks are the inferior stock of human beings. And this is our legacy? Before I started studying history from the origins of humanity in Africa over 200,000 years ago, before that, it was very hard for me, even though I studied African American history, Africana history, when confronted with the raw brilliance of ancient Kemet, it was too much. But as I began to delve deeper into history, I began to see that, wow, ancient Kemet didn't just form out of the sky. It didn't just form in a vacuum of itself, in and of itself, but it was the highest form or the highest expression of all of the technology, of all of the genius, of all of the thought that had been cultivating all throughout the African continent for literally over 200,000 years. That's a very, 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 very long time. So to erase all of that from history and jumpstart civilization at with Western civilization, it's a crime. It's a crime. You're literally robbing people of their histories, robbing people of their culture. So when we talk about civilization, when we talk about a group of people that say they're here to bring civilization, but in effect, what we see is that you're destroying civilization. You're not bringing anything new. You're perverting things and then destroying the original copy. So, without further ado, because we have a lot to talk about today, and I want to show you guys, maybe we'll get through a whole documentary on the foundations of ancient Kemet. And again, this is done by a white woman, Joanne Fletcher, professor out of I believe, the University of York in the UK. So when we talk about our history, when we talk about our culture, when we talk about being liberated, here we are in 2022. And no African person is being consulted to discuss African history. African history is literally owned by other people. They control the narrative because they own the history. If you own something, you can choose to destroy it at all. We see this in capitalism all the time. You'll have a new upstart company with an emerging technology, and the big boys go and buy the company out and destroy the technology. This is nothing new. This is in their wheelhouse. So this lecture series is about African liberation. I don't want you guys to tune in to the Black Achievement Fund, to tune in to me for a feel-good lecture about Black history. The Black Achievement Fund is active right now in a revolution to restore the things that we're studying right now, so that this is now being studied on a broad scale. Because I say this and I'll say it till I die. The only way to destroy racism is to destroy the foundations, the roots. And the roots is the lies, the propaganda. All that has to be done is the teaching of the truth. If you teach world history from the origins of humanity in Africa up into the present, there is absolutely no way under the sun that you could sell a theory of racism, of white supremacy. It will become laughable to the entire world, the suggestion of it. So I say this not just to Black people out there, not just to Black educators, but all of my liberal white friends, all of my liberal Asian friends, all of my liberal Latino friends. If you are seriously interested in getting rid of racism, then we all need to, in unison, begin to teach the truth. If you simply teach world history the truth, there is absolutely, racism is over. Just like that. And I say this to say, it is that simple. And they know it's that simple. They know what the foundation of their theory is. They're not retarded. They made it up. And because they were able to control the history, the narrative, they were able to suppress the evidence. So here, in the information age, in the internet age, all of the evidence is right before us. So we're going to start off with a slideshow This slideshow is of rock art. All of this rock art, for the most part, precedes the civilization of ancient Kemet. Many of it by thousands and thousands of years. So when I started thinking about some of the fascinating things that come up is, man, they still got paint on the monuments, thousands of years old. You can still see the paint. The Egyptians had to be brilliant. They were able to mix chemistry together and create a paint that lasts thousands of years on rock, weathering all types of climate. Then I look at the rock art. The rock art way older than Kemet. The rock art is on granite, sandstone, just like Kemet. Now, when you go and start looking at rock art, the earlier the rock art, obviously the more primitive and crude everything is. But the one thing that I noticed was in the early beginnings, they were always running. Always running. All the images that you saw, they're running. And as the time progresses, you begin to see them with weapons. You begin to see them with shields. You begin to see the bow and arrow. A lot of people don't know that the bow and arrow was created 64,000 years ago in Africa and remained the most sophisticated and deadly hunting tool and weapon all throughout antiquity up until the gun. And that was created 64,000 years ago. Ancient Kemet, pre-dynastic, you're talking 5,000 BC. Put that against 64,000 years ago. When you talk about decoration, when you talk about creating jewelry and things like that, you already begin to see that in rock art. Look at the jewelry around their neck. Look at the jewelry around their arms. Look at the jewelry around their calves. Here's the other thing that you notice, that they paint themselves brown. And you can clearly see that there's white in this image as well. So they know the color white. They have access to creating the color white. And yet what we see are brown people. And you see white. If you really study the rock art closely, you begin to see some other extraordinary feats. Look inside this, the last guy to the right. They have the intestines painted inside the stomach to let you know that we understand human anatomy. When you talk about the world's first surgeons, they were the first human beings. They weren't any Egyptians. The world's first surgeons are butchers. Look how expertly human beings begin to be able to butcher all types of game, all types of wildlife. Imagine how many years they're studying this. To now, they know the similarities across all anatomy. So when you begin again to give credit to different people for different things in history, we tend to forget the people who didn't write down or codify their achievements. When you think about the first fire, who were the first people to see fire? Who were the first people to manipulate fire? Who were the first people to canoe, to get on the boat? These were African people way before some ancient Kemet, way before any ancient Nubia. The Nile River is the longest river in the world. It's the greatest source of water for this continent. So now you have people drawn to the Nile. They're seeing logs floating, and they're like, man, a whole tree, heavy as it is, can float in water. Let's get on top of it and see where it takes us. And this is how you begin to get settlements dotted all on the Nile on both sides. So I want us to begin to think about history from a rationalization perspective. And that is to go all the way back to the first man and begin to rationalize what are some of the achievements that earlier man made in order for the population to spring forth into a civilization that we know it today. All right? It didn't just happen overnight. Boats. We talked about boats. There is a lot of research that has been done on the African presence in the Americas in the past 30, 40 years that is just now receiving a lot of serious attention from a lot of serious scholars in the Orthodox Academy. And I've always laughed at that because I'm like, these are the first people to deal with a boat. These are the first people to navigate. So why would we think that as brilliant as these people were, that they would stay on the African continent forever? The problem that we have is that we have embraced a European mind state that if African people left the continent to go to other places, they're going to go as conquerors. But what we know and what we've seen is that they've gone and they've shared gifts. There is no incentive for these people to be at odds with one another. This is a part of Cheikh Anta Diop's two cradle theory, in which he talked about the northern cradle, the Aryan cradle, and the southern cradle, the African cradle. And he discussed the impact of climate on human physiology, as well as personality development, as well as spiritual development. When you're in a cold environment, where there's scarcity of water, there's scarcity of food, human beings are more apt to be at odds than to be collaborators. If there is no large game like there is in Africa to feed a large group of people, and all you got are rabbits and foxes and small game and rodents, there is an intense competition amongst men. Food is scarce. You don't have the time in the sun to sit and relax and think about things other than immediate survival. You are constantly foraging, looking for food. Constantly, for sheer survival. The African personality, the African mindset, the African worldview is fundamentally different from all other people, precisely because of the richness of the African continent and the richness of the things that the continent gave the first human beings. You have food galore. You have water galore. And all of these things are huge. We kill one cow, and all of us can eat for how long? It's more advantageous for us to work cooperatively than independently. The relationship to the female is a positive relationship because children means we have more labor. We have a stronger team. You're not worried about what they're going to eat. You're not in competition with your fellow man. So thus, from a rationalization standpoint or perspective in history, we see that in Africa, the first human beings got it right. They got it right. And I don't care to be, I guess you can say, sounding subjective when I say they got it right. But if human beings are going to thrive on earth as a team, this is the model by which it has to happen. It's a natural model. Again, I want you guys to look at the amount of food that was present. The amount of food. And I want you to contrast to other places. You have, and another thing I want you to notice is that out of all the things to draw, they consistently are drawing animals. They're consistently drawing animals. And their interaction with these animals are peaceful. You don't see huge slaughter scenes and all of those things. They are coexisting with these animals. You look at this image here, you see that this bull is pregnant. You can see they've drawn a bull through relief, and you can see the nipples full of milk. Another thing you see is ritual. You see human beings acting harmoniously. You see order. You don't see conflict. You see harmony. Here's an image of a man and woman and their two children suckling milk from an animal. So when you talk about what is African history, what is African culture, what is the African worldview, we expressed it visually, artistically. Here you witness a people living in harmony with nature. You see people climbing. You see people praying. You see animals that look prehistoric, like dinosaur. And what you see here, you see a clan. You see some type of large-scale settlement. You see that these people are united in some type of society, in some type of settlement, in some type of culture, in some type of tribe. There is uniformity. So when we talk about our history, we're beginning with world history. This is all humanity's history. Because the time period that you're seeing, Africa is the light of the world. And it's from Africa that all of humanity migrated to all parts of the continent. The time frame in which African people were on the continent, the time frame in which African people migrated out to the point in which the human body began to change physically, you're talking tens of thousands of years. The first Africans to migrate into Eurasia, you're talking around 60,000 years ago. There they encountered Neanderthal. They interbred with Neanderthal. They encountered a diametrically opposite environment. Think about this now. Think about this very carefully. They inherited a diametrically opposite environment than Africa. So in turn, what ends up happening is the personality formulation, the development, the worldview, it becomes polar opposite. Where once, man, we all were united as one against all of these other animals. Now we're in fierce competition over a few rabbits. Now we're in fierce competition over caves. Now it's not advantageous to have a woman because I can barely feed me. How am I going to feed a child? This is where a personality of individualism comes from. You make it the best way you know how, I make it the best way I know how. And I'm extrapolating here from Diop's two-cradle theory once again. And you can read more about his two-cradle theory in one of his earlier books. I believe it's called The Cultural Unity of Black Africa. We've been robbed of our history. We've been robbed of our history because to tell our history correctly is to not only overthrow racism, but is to actually suggest the opposite. That maybe African people might even be superior to these people. And there's no qualifications when you talk about a human being because we all have the same value. It's not a competition. But what I'm talking about is a group of people who have weaponized history and have utilized it as one of the greatest weapons in the hands of imperialist people. If you think about the length in which it took for them to hide all of this, why? Why go through that much trouble? It tells you the type of power you're dealing with. When we talk about carvings on the pyramids, on the monuments in ancient Kemet, you're seeing stuff thousands of years before Egypt, thousands of years before Kemet. You see Black African people expressing creativity, a profound aesthetic ability, carving. Why? They have leisure. They have plenty of food. They have plenty of water. They have time to cultivate their minds to the higher things in life. They have time to study and observe. Look at the number of animals they have to learn from. How do you think we got the constellations? The constellations are named after animals with particular traits. You got human beings studying animals. You have human beings practicing on animals. You have human beings observing animals with their young. If you're thirsty, you know an elephant has to drink. I can follow elephants. I can look at animals and begin to tell when the weather's going to change. All of this is observational knowledge that accumulated over time becomes a body of knowledge. And a body of knowledge, you can now extract theories. And this is what you're seeing. You're seeing people, just like right now, human beings today. We all know when the season's changing. You don't need a meteorologist to tell you that. We can tell, like right now, I've been outside this week, and I know that the seasons are changing. Not because of a meteorologist, but because of my experience in life. So when we think about history, this is a more honorable approach to take. Because once we begin to do this, all of these people that you're seeing here, they begin to get credit. Look at the jewelry again. So people all over the continent, just like in 2022, we go and we see this. We even imitate it. We want to know where these people are. And we're going to look for these people. Look how marvelous this is. We've been told that black people, this violence against violence. When you think about black people, interacting with each other, they want to throw the violence in Chicago in your face. And all of this that we're seeing, this is the result of us being in an alien culture, an alien environment. I know more black people who are European in worldview and culture than I know African people who are African in worldview and culture and in practice. So what we're seeing with the loss of our own culture and the inability to be embraced by the mainstream culture, we are in a suspended state where we don't know what African liberation looks like anymore. And we're afraid to turn to Africa because we've been told that everything African is dark, is backwards, is debasing. This is what you're seeing. Are you seeing war scenes? Are you seeing fighting scenes? As these individual Africans, look at here, the rays of the sun. So you already see the foundation of spirituality being formed. You see, quote unquote, primitive people already glorifying the sun. You look at this image. They've drawn the sun's rays and they're sitting, chilling under the sun in harmony. All the wildlife you see. Rituals. I even think about the level of drawing. I can't draw like this. I couldn't draw animals like this. You see clothes. So now we're going to turn to a documentary by with Joanne Fletcher. She's a professor at the University of York in the UK. And once again, someone else owning our history. Now, when you watch this, as you see a white woman talking about African history, Egyptian history, never really using the word African at all, it's easy for you to begin to absorb what she's saying and the history that she's presenting as if it's not Black African. The images that they use are images that show fair-skinned Egyptians. And all of this stuff is deliberate. But within all of that, they do shed a lot of light and provide a lot of truth. So we're going to watch some of this, and I'll break a little bit more down for you, some of the propaganda.
Pyramids, surely it encapsulates the spirit of Egypt.
But such an image is completely misleading. Because there weren't any camels here when the pyramids were built 4,500 years ago. And that's the thing. Ancient Egypt is instantly recognizable, but all too often completely misunderstood. So, I'm gonna try and change that.
Good luck.
The Great Pyramid of Giza, final resting place of King Khufu, over 140 meters from bottom to top. No wonder it still pulls in the crowds and the occasional Egyptologist.
Smell here? It's hard to really get it into words, but we are now entering into the depths of this iconic monument of ancient Egypt. Smell here? It's a very busy iconic monument, though. Smell here. And as we set foot on this journey upwards, it's a brilliant metaphor for the way that the ancient Egyptian civilization literally rose up from the earth to a real zenith. So come with me and I'll show you something really brilliant.
Because the pyramids are really only the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, flipping out.
So all this was a big city capital.
Overwhelmingly size. That is absolutely superb.
In this series, I'm going to explore the story of what I consider to be the world's greatest civilization. More than 4,000 years of history that has shaped our world and left unmistakable marks that can still be read today. I'll be looking into...
And you notice she'll say openly, this is the world's greatest civilization. But when it comes to, is it an African civilization? No, let's leave that to mystery. Let's not discuss that.
every nook and cranny. From little-known tombs
It's staggering. I've never ever been into a tomb quite like this before.
to the hidden corners of vast monuments.
It's like being on top of the world, isn't it?
Yeah, we are in the top of Karnak.
So it's really no surprise that weird and wonderful theories about ancient Egypt crop up all the time. But what I find so amazing is that this most intriguing civilization was actually created by people not so very different from you and me. And that's the story I want to tell. A story full of secret treasures, dark deeds, and sometimes controversial theories. This mask was originally made for someone else. And for the first time, I'll be piecing it all together. From the earliest Egyptians to the last of the pharaohs.
Wow, look at that, look at that. That is so beautiful.
Welcome to my story of ancient Egypt. The big question is, how did ancient Egypt begin? Where did the first Egyptians and their extraordinary culture come from? This immortal civilization was thousands of years in the making, so to pull it all together is a daunting task. But bear with me, as it's utterly fascinating. But we won't begin with massive monuments, but with some enigmatic clues you could easily miss. This is Kirta, around 100 kilometers south of Luxor. Unless you're an archaeologist, you almost certainly won't have heard of it. Because there aren't any great temples or royal tombs to admire. But high in the cliffs, you can see real signs of ancient life here. Thousands of years before the pyramids. And this is where our story begins.
Welcome to Kurta, Joanne.
Thank you so much for letting me come here. It's incredibly exciting.
It's the first time you're here, I suppose.
Yes.
Nothing escapes the sharp eye of Dr. Dirk Huyger, and he's got something very special to show me.
Not many people have been here before you because it's a quite recent discovery.
These carvings in the rock reveal an amazing story about the beginnings of Egyptian life. It's a 19,000-year-old picture gallery, complete with its own hippo.
Back line, very short tail, hind legs, belly line, front legs, and the mouth is shown. Hippo is smiling, but then again, an hippo is always smiling.
But another type of animal is by far the most common here.
That's cattle.
It's not just cattle. There's the mighty aurochs, the wild buffet, wild cattle. And extremely powerful images that seem to be in movement.
They are, they're charging down
Yeah.
towards us, aren't they?
These wild aurochs were ancestors of the domestic cow. And nearly 20,000 years ago, beef was the main thing on the menu.
About maybe 50% of their diet was composed of aurochs. So they were experts and masters in representing this animal. It's always high on the cliff, very prominent positions that give an excellent panorama over what must have been in the Paleolithic the hunting grounds of the people.
It's easy to picture these early hunters here as they tracked their prey. But the landscape would have looked very different from today, because back then, this was savanna grassland, a green and fertile region.
Do we have any idea why these creatures were engraved on these rocks here?
We can guess, Joanne, but we don't know. Maybe they wanted to influence the hunting. Maybe this is some sort of hunting magic.
It really is magical to sit here and imagine Egypt's earliest nomadic people passing right through this spot and portraying on these very rocks the animals that they saw all around them.
Human figures and boats joined the animals as the carvings became stranger and stranger. But these carvings are also the...
Look at the size of the boat. Look at how many oars there are. So you're talking about 17,000 years ago, and you're seeing boats with this level of sophistication, oars, suggesting that they're now understanding how to navigate and not just be on a log and let the current take them wherever it goes. 17,000 years before ancient Kemet.
earliest glimpse of the amazing things to come. These are the first signs of what makes ancient Egypt.
You may have missed it, but I want you to catch this amulet
It really
that they
is
have
magical
on one of the
to
cows.
sit here and imagine Egypt's earliest nomadic people passing
a
right
charm.
through this spot and portraying on these very rocks the animals that they saw all around them.
Human figures and boats joined the animals as the carvings became stranger and stranger. But these carvings are also the earliest glimpse of the amazing things to come.
See, look at here.
These are the first signs of what makes ancient Egypt, well, ancient Egypt. As for its ancient landscape, this evolved under dramatic circumstances. 10,000 years ago, gravity tilted the entire Earth off its axis by about half a degree, and this had a profound effect on climate. And as the world began to change, Egypt would never be the same again.
Now, these early people were nomads, seasonally mobile pastoralists who moved around following the summer rains. And these rains really were the vital, life-bringing force which created the greenery on which wild animals depended. But of course, with climate change, these rains began to dry up. Okay, you can cut the rain.
The diminishing rainfall forced both animals and people towards large lakes, which formed during the rainy season. One such area is Nabta Playa, 100 kilometers southwest of Aswan. And here, these nomadic hunters began to settle into communities. But still reliant on the annual summer rains, they needed to predict exactly when these would return. And so they turned to the night sky.
Welcome to the beginning of time. Quite literally, because this is Egypt's oldest calendar.
At around 7,000 years old, this stone circle from Nabta Playa is the earliest evidence of how Egyptian weather forecasters became astronomers. They aligned its central stones to the circumpolar stars, visible in the night sky all year round. When the sun appeared directly overhead, the stones cast no shadow. The midsummer rains were approaching. This meant that the animals would drink, the plants would grow, and the world would survive for another year. So in many ways, this circle represents the solution to the very real problem of survival. But the Egyptians would take this a step further.
I think the really great thing about these mini monumental markers is that this is the earliest example we have of the way in which the Egyptians are aligning their monuments to various things, to the sky, to the cardinal points. And from now on, every tomb, every temple, every monument will be aligned to the heavens, to the very gods themselves.
And the foundation of all of this is thousands of years prior to the first dynasty.
Stars and the rain were this closely linked. Then this world and the next must be one and the same.
Now, this has been described as Egypt's earliest sculpted stone monument and dates from around 5000 BC.
This chunk of sandstone was quarried over a mile away from where it was eventually discovered.
This certainly suggests a kind of sense of community where people were already working together to achieve a desired aim. In this case, the stone was hauled into place, and then there are clear signs that it's been sculpted into a specific shape.
Now, you might have to go with me on this, but some believe that this is in fact a cow, with its large hindquarters and this sculpted head.
Now, the cow was a vital part of everyday life for these people. It was a source of meat, of milk, and of blood, key sources of protein they needed to keep them healthy. And yet so important was the cow, they chose to take it through into the afterlife with them.
Once again, you see the quarrying and importation of huge rock, sandstone, granite, thousands of years before ancient Kemet. So when we begin to talk about all of the things that were pioneered by the people of Kemet, a lot of these things were not pioneered in Kemet. A lot of these things were pioneered elsewhere. And the people from those places brought that knowledge into Kemet. And this is how Kemet ends up being, like in America, you have a New York or you have an LA. As people begin to hear about other places where things are happening, you get people migrating to those areas. And in this case, we have a climatic change where the Sahara is turning from a lush savanna grassland to a desert. So right now, you have two motivating factors that are pushing people towards the Nile Valley. The other being that the Nile River is the first cultural highway of the world. And if you get on the Nile River anywhere in the interior of Africa and you stay on it, it's ultimately going to end and lead you into the Mediterranean Sea. And the rest of the known world was dotted all along the Mediterranean. In addition to that, the richest soil, the richest silt that comes from the Nile is emptied in the Nile Valley, in the Nile Delta, where Egypt happens to be located. So Egypt is able to feed a wide range of people because of how rich the Nile Delta is. So very, very important key facts. And also seeing once again that a lot of the things, and critical things, how do you move a rock this big from miles away with the technology that we think was available at that time? And this is the brilliance that African people had when African people had African minds.
To sustain them on a spiritual level. And this is the very beginnings of the great cow goddess, Hathor.
Hathor may have started off as a source of milk and meat, but eventually she would be loved and idolized by millions of Egyptians, since she represented love, joy, beauty, and motherhood. And although her image develops from a lifelike animal to a female face with cow's ears, this may be Hathor's very earliest incarnation. Yet Hathor is only one of a multitude of gods and goddesses. The Egyptians just couldn't get enough of them. Over the centuries emerged hundreds, if not thousands of deities, each with a specific purpose and appearance. Some came in human form.
And to make a correction, these aren't thousands of deities. African people of Kemet, they believe that God manifested itself through all of these different channels of nature. And therefore, human beings worship those aspects of God's power within all of those different elements. It's a whole big difference from worshiping a cow in the sense that you think that this is a creator or something like that.
Some had animal heads. They could be male, female, even androgynous. It seems that there were few aspects of life that didn't have their own gods. We know that in the very earliest times, their gods resembled familiar things, the world around them, elements of nature, and certainly animals. And over time, the animals, their forms, their shapes, their characteristics were distilled down into this sort of divine figure, each one worshipped for a different quality. In the case of the ram, they were worshipped for their procreative powers. In the case of the cow, for their nurturing, motherly instincts. And of course, you've got rather different creatures.
And the ram was honored for strength, not procreation.
Dangerous creatures, the ones that lived on the edges of the Egyptian world, the lions, the crocodiles, the jackals. But it wasn't just about finding the appropriate divinity. It was about gaining power over them. The goddess Sekhmet was a ferocious lioness and the bringer of death to humans. So the Egyptians transformed her into a deity as a way of controlling her destructive powers. By worshipping Sekhmet, it was believed that she could be placated and transformed into a more benign deity. On so many levels, the Egyptians were trying to tap into nature to affect the way that nature then in turn affected them. In many ways, Egypt's unique religion was the glue that held society together, uniting the population and underpinning almost every aspect of life. It's everywhere, in tombs, in temples, in everyday life. And yet, there is another, even more fundamental element, without which ancient Egypt would never have existed at all. Later Greek historians famously observed that Egypt was the gift of the Nile. And how right they were, because as the climate continued to change, the desert lakes eventually dried up, leaving the Egyptians with just one source of water. This is an incredibly special place. Located in modern Sudan, it nonetheless forms the very source of Egypt. For it's the place where two great rivers meet, the White Nile and the Blue Nile, which combine here to form the world's longest river, flowing from the heart of Africa and out into the Mediterranean Sea. For much of the year, the wide, lazy White Nile is the main source of water, until annual rainfall in the Ethiopian highlands swells the faster-flowing Blue Nile. Today, the modern Aswan dams hold back these floodwaters, but until the 20th century, huge volumes of water and fertile silt surged downriver to flood the entire Nile Valley.
The Aswan Dam that she's referring to actually covered up a lot of African artifacts, statues, and things like that. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Bringing life and fertility to the desert that is Egypt. This annual Nile flood was the single most important.
I'm going to stop it there and we'll resume next week there. I wanted to stop there because I wanted to talk a little bit more about the role of religion in the formation of ancient Kemet. Joanne Fletcher got it right. Spirituality was the foundation of ancient Kemetic civilization. Other things she got right was that the spirituality that was personified in ancient Kemet was developed before ancient Kemet. It was not developed by a king to subdue the minds of people, to make people give them money and all of those things. It wasn't. It was developed organically. It was developed organically based upon the type of life that African people were living. They were dependent on the rains. They were dependent on animals. So they showed respect to the things that they were dependent upon. They understood themselves within the larger scope of earth. We were other animals. They were benevolent people because there was an abundance. And even when the climate began to change, there was still on the entirety of the continent enough locations where human beings could gather and feed themselves. And because of the nature in how societies emerge on cooperation and not competition, once these individual groups begin to gather and meet one another, they're meeting with the same level of humanity that they had been living with prior. So you get a situation where African people are able to unite on their own accord without warfare. She's going to talk next week about the formation of ancient Kemet into one land. She's going to talk about the sources of the two lands, the foundations of ancient pharaonic civilization. And she's going to talk about it as if ancient Kemet was orchestrated by a pharaoh, a king, who wanted to conquer, control, and impose some type of foreign will, some type of despotism, or whatever it may be. Ancient Kemet, the foundation of ancient Kemet, was thousands of years in the making. All of the knowledge that you see personified in ancient Kemet, well, most of it came from outside of ancient Kemet. It was not a group of people that we call the Egyptians that no longer exist and just vanished, that were responsible for all of the pioneering knowledge that was manifested in ancient Kemet. It just so was not the case. The study of the stars, the study of mathematics, all of these things were cultivated for thousands of years before Kemet. So by the time you get to Kemet, you already have scientific methods for discerning the seasons, when the raining season was going to come. You already have human beings structured within a society of cooperation. You already have worship, and not just a singular worship, but a worship of all things that bring prosperity to human beings. It is a positive relationship that you see human beings developing with nature. This is fundamentally, foundationally, who African people are. As brilliant as these people were, do you think any of them were sitting around trying to create a weapon of mass destruction that can destroy the whole planet? Out of all the complicated things that they studied, if they wanted to focus all of their talent, attention to mass destruction, they could blow this planet up 1 billion times over. It was not in the imagination of the African to want to destroy other people, to want to destroy the planet, to want to destroy nature, to want to tear down other people's culture. Why would I have to do that? When Europeans ventured over into the Western Hemisphere, look what the result was. When African people went to the Western Hemisphere before Europeans, look what the result was. When African people were on top of the world and Kemetic pharaonic civilization lasted for over 3,000 years, who did they go and try to conquer? Who did they go and try to exploit? Who? Who? Did they go south into the interior and try to control and take over all of the gold mines and enslave all the people who were bringing them gold? Did they decide to go up into Europe and conquer Europe and go up into the other aspects of the Mediterranean and conquer people and rape and pillage their settlements, their civilizations? I ask you, the answer is no. It's a resounding no. When you study world history, when you study African history as an African person, you become more and more proud of who you are every stage of your learning. Every stage of your learning. We're great people. We've done nothing but great things. And our kindness has been taken for weakness. We have been exploited because of our kindness. We have been exploited because from day one, all we've known is abundance. A person who lives on the beach is nothing to them. They're not going to try to come and build a bunch of condos on the beach. I see it, I experience it. It's when you have nothing. It's when you have a fierce competition for resources, as when you begin to get a radically different social structure, social development. And we were fortunate that, and I won't even say fortunate, I would argue that human beings could not have evolved into this species anywhere else on the planet. So when you talk to your children about African history, you have to understand that African American history, that is the lowest point of African history. When I show you guys the timeline, just from what you've seen tonight, the foundations of ancient Kemet, 17,000 BC. And here we only in 2000 AD, 2,000 years away from the BC era. We've been brilliant for a long time. We have been cooperating with each other for a very long time. For a very long time. We've had such an abundance that we weren't fighting over material things. And I'm not trying to over-embellish African history, because you don't have to. You don't have to. Racism is founded on the false propaganda that African people are inferior to European people, and that when European people met the African was uncivilized, had no religion, no history, or nothing. That is racism. That is racism. So if the foundation of racism is false propaganda, is lies, then the only way to conquer it is with the truth. Teach the truth. All the things that you've seen tonight, none of them were white people. None of them were Europeans. Europeans aren't even on the planet. There's no such thing. So if you're not even around when the foundations of civilization not only have emerged, but have flourished for thousands of years, you're not even around. How can you lay claim to this? Easy. Destroy evidence of everything that came before us. Now, here we're in an information age. All of the stuff that you try to destroy, now the people have access to it. Now we can proliferate all of the truth all around the world, damn near instantaneously. This is our moment, African people. This is our moment to reclaim our throne. All of the false pretensions of Europeans have been exposed. This civilization is terrible. Today, I spoke with a Black Achievement Fund member. In 1 week, his nephew and one of his close friends killed themselves. 3-4 weeks ago, 19-year-old boy in Memphis goes on a mass murder spree, kills 4 people. And his mom, I just can't take this anymore. The Native American committed suicide because they couldn't take being subjected to European culture, to the European worldview. No other people in the world has been able to integrate in peace with the European. It always has to be on the European terms or not at all. Look at the whole world. This is the example. Conversely, everywhere the African has gone, we have added value. Everywhere we've gone, in every civilization we've ever been a part of, we've done nothing but add value. And here in 2022, we're being attacked on a regular basis that your people, black people, are violent, black people are criminal, black people are lazy, the black man is terrible, the black woman is a welfare queen. And we put our head down. And we're ashamed of who we are. So we be trying to become like Europeans, thinking that they'll accept us if we talk like them, if we dress like them, if we know all of their history, if we can pronounce all the fancy food they eat, if we eat casserole like them. If I can just imitate them enough, maybe they'll like me and embrace me so I can like myself. You are not what you think. You are your actions. So if you're not an honorary, trying to be an honorary European, gauge your actions. Gauge your actions. Is it my goal to go visit a European place or African place? Do I wear European clothes or African clothes? Are my children going to European school or African school? Am I practicing an African religion or a European religion? These are simple questions. It's very simple questions. Most of us can't answer the African and be truthful. What is luxury? Every single thing that is luxury is European. Restaurants, the most exclusive restaurant we can go to, European. Car, the most exclusive car we want is a European. Clothes, the most expensive clothes we want, European. We're at a point where we don't even recognize that we are slowly but surely embracing European culture too much, and we're becoming just like Europeans. Is that a good thing? Is that a good thing? What does success in America look like for an African? Ask yourself that. It looks European. It looks European. You must be European and embrace European culture. If you are to obtain success in America, you have to go through those channels. So we think. But when we do a survey of other groups that do not integrate, we see that they're more successful than us. Asian Americans have the highest median household income in the United States of America, $94,903,000 a year. White people, $74,000. You're talking $20,000 more in annual household income. 58.1% of all Asian Americans have a 4-year college degree. Do you see them working in any mainstream corporate companies? Do you see them running out to vote? You do not. Do you see them in your public schools? Do you see them in the mall? Do you see them at the Cheesecake Factory? Do you see them at Applebee's? Do you see them at a concert you go to? Do you see them at a basketball game you go to? No, you don't. Why? Because they have retained their own culture. They practice their own culture in America. They create their own communities. They have their own community centers. Their communities put together their own cultural plays and performances. But here, black people, we trying to be honorary Europeans. We want to do everything the European do. I even hear black people saying, I want my children to do non-traditional black things. And I say, wait. You want your kid to be African, think African, embrace African culture, then you want your kids to do non-traditional African things. There's nothing wrong in embracing different things, but to consciously prioritize or put something else of somebody else on a pedestal over your own, and we don't even recognize that we do it. The Black Achievement Fund, this is our revolution. This is our time. An economic revolution, one that will be able to help us save our culture, to bring African people back to the world stage, for new humane leadership, to restore balance on earth. That is our mission this generation. And the great thing about it is that the pathway to achieving this is all within our hands. We don't need to compel anybody else to do anything for us to make this happen. 10 million of us, $9 a month. Tomorrow morning, we could wake up with $90 million. Tomorrow morning. And then the next month, another 90 million. And the next month, another. In 3 months, $250 million. In 3 months. What do we do with the money? We could build a new school a month, a new hospital a month. Look how many people we can employ. But we can't do anything broke. We can't do anything with all of us still hung on, trying to be an honorary European. Still trying.
So about the blackness. It's in my wallet.
It's the most illogical thing I've ever sat and contemplated. We sit up here and we study a people that for the last 500 years have done nothing but roam earth, looking to conquer and exploit other people under a philosophy of racism and greed. And here we are, our philosophy is to emerge ourselves into this system. That is the most, I can't even, I mean, as a thinking man, how am I supposed to absorb this? How is a young black man supposed to reconcile this illogical strategy for African liberation? He goes insane. That's what he does. He goes insane. He's forced to go at it alone because the culture has disintegrated around him, around her. More and more, we are understanding that in order for us to prosper in their system, we have to come in with a white face. We got to come in and try to seem less threatening. How you doing, buddy? You can't be you. This cannot be liberation. It's not liberation. I don't care you living in a mansion. You are not liberated. At what expense? At what expense? We're showing you through the Black Achievement Fund how we can generate the level of wealth on par with what people from Kemet did, on par from what the Mansa Musas did. We have the talent, the ability, the technology, everything is in place, except for the will. Out of fear. If I join the Black Achievement Fund and these white folks see my social media and see me up here with this, this guy up here talking all this black stuff, black self-determination, I might be out of a damn job. If you that scared, don't rock Black Achievement Fund stuff at work. Don't tell nobody you with the Black Achievement Fund. We ain't gonna tell nobody. Asians don't go around and parade how they pool their wealth together. They don't parade their strategy around on social media. They just do it. But we can't keep doing the same thing. 60 years later, we're still analyzing the results and seeing that that strategy of integration alone has not delivered African liberation. It never could. It never could. And any leader that's going to try to tell me that my liberation exists in trying to become a part of the American mainstream, you're not my leader. I don't know who you are. But I embrace African culture not just because I'm African, but because it's humane. When I study African history and African culture, I'm inspired. I'm inspired by what I see. I'm not reading about a whole bunch of gory wars all the time. I'm reading about people and seeing people working in harmony, developing things that made life better for everybody. That is our purpose here. But we have to detach ourselves from this need to think that we cannot succeed independent of the machine, especially when we have evidence of other groups right here in America who are hated just like us. And I'm not trying to compare oppressions whatsoever. Black people, we know, okay, yeah, we've been enslaved, no other people been enslaved. But white people don't like nobody else. So they catch hell too. But they didn't decide to go and try to join their oppressors. Instead, they work internally together to create spaces in America where they can be themselves in peace. And that's that. Let them do what they do. It's not my business. So long as they don't come in our neighborhood with it. It is time for us to wake up and to understand that in order for us to arrive at African liberation, we have to go at it alone. There is no one else that can interpret what African liberation should be or even know our history. It ain't just black people that don't know. The whole world don't know. This has been hidden from the whole world. But our brilliance is absolutely unquestionable. For human beings to do what you just saw out of the jungle with what? They ain't on no Walmart, Home Depot. On no YouTube TV, show me how to do this. And arose a physical manifestation of their brilliance. They didn't build shopping malls. They built temples. They didn't build jails. They built temples. They didn't build just big mansions for myself. The biggest things that they built were in honor to gods, goddesses, and for the public, for the people. I'm going to end tonight, guys, with join the Black Achievement Fund. www.baf.solutions. It's easy, it's simple, it's painless. We're a nonprofit 501c3 corporation. Your $9 is 100% tax deductible. We're talking $108 a year. A year. The money that's coming in now is going to support the growth of the organization. In addition to that, we also provide a series of benefits for Black Achievement Fund members, for our nonprofit community, so on and so forth. So check us out, www.baf.solutions. Join the movement. This is the easiest movement you will ever be introduced to. And this is the best type of movement. This is the type of movement where we at the point where everyone else did all the hard work. Everyone else did all the hard work. We get to put the crown on. We get to put the crown back on. That's this generation. That's this generation. All right? So on that note, everyone, it's 9:30. I've kept you guys 30 minutes over. I enjoyed you again tonight. I look forward to next week, same time, Thursday at 8 p.m. And Sunday, we will also have an info session at 2 p.m. Please like this lecture on YouTube, share the lecture on YouTube, and get someone else to join the Black Achievement Fund if you've already joined. All right? On that note, enjoy the rest of your night, everyone. Love you guys. See you